Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Kessler, and I want to welcome you to the May edition, actually, the episode of the Clear Review. This is a site that's designed for common sense people who are willing to look and have a real desire to know. For those of you who've been subscribers for a while, you already know this, but I know there's some new people joining us this month. And we are known for a very unique insight and perspective on the issues that we're all struggling with in the world today and in our communities. There's nothing cliche on this site, there's nothing predictable here. It involves commentary weekly, podcast weekly, and a once a month webcast. So we begin every month as we are today. This is the May 1st edition. And I'm excited to be with you. We have a very special guest who will be joining us. But before he does so, I want to set the stage a bit for how we got here and what we're doing last month and this month. As I mentioned, we begin each month with a 1 hour webcast where I can share special insights with you and perspective. And in March, we finished what had been a 4 part, 4 month series that was entitled How to Train Yourself to See What Others Miss. And I want to encourage all of you to review all four of those in sequence. Actually, when it comes to the webcast, these are not random. This is almost like an educational process where step by step by step, I'm heightening, hopefully, everyone's awareness and bringing in a different angle of view so that just as the name suggests, you can get a clear view. But very especially in the 4 part series, when you get to that, review those because you will find them very, very enlightening. And they led to where we are today. The first one was entitled My January 6th Story. And I do have a January 6th story, but it's not what you think. So you'll want to get into that. And that leads to the second one called The Actor's Process. Now, you may not be an actor. You may never want to be an actor. You may not even like actors. It has nothing to do with that. There is something in the training of an actor that enabled me to crack the case, if you will, that led to the whole White King series and which is underpinning a lot of what we are doing here. So you are going to want to get into that one. The third one is a vital, vital principle, and it's called Look, Don't Listen. And there's a lot of insight there that I think will bring about some peace of mind to you and help you along the way. The last one was entitled Simple Truths, Simple Tools, and Simple Solutions. Just like in Operation Stone Age Viral, which is the ending and the solution in the final novel of the 4 part series known as the White King series. The final novel, entitled White King and the Seat at the Table, is really the final novel. Americans win it there, and the people of the world win it there, or we do not. And if you know me and the way I write prescient fiction, meaning that I'm writing in advance of the incidents and events that are about to happen, but they do happen. And that's what I have become known for. But in that final one, my heroes, but the American people, you, the people, become the solution. You actually become part of the book. And an operation called Operation Stone Age Viral launched. And that's that. Over here in the clear view, as I talk to you and as I bring guests to you, I want you always to know that I have made this promise and commitment to you that when I talk to you knowing that you are the solution. I don't look for solutions top down. I am always talking to you as individuals. But I do know that we have to engage more now than ever before. And I'm going to be talking to you to help you engage by yourself if need be. No fear in that. I was alone when I started this whole process nearly 20 years ago, and certainly alone when I started the Clear View. But I also know that some of you who are listening are already in various arenas. You may head other organizations. You may have started other organizations, or you may be part of them. But here on this site, we all can come together. And I'm going to end this talk after we finish with our guest with how that comes together, a very special definition, and why what we're doing here is so very, very important. So you hang in there with that, because whether you're by yourself or part of a group, here we're all together, all the groups. Now, if you'll remember, those of you who had the opportunity to watch the four-part series, at the end, I promised that I would start bringing on guests who had decided to do something. They had found a problem, they decided to weigh in, and they just decided to do something. And last month, we had John Spagnola on. And if you'll remember, that was a very successful interview. And this man has taken from the beginning to now a bill before Congress, and it's there. It's entitled the Written Informed Consent Act. That's the draft title on it. But he's also taken it and formed a cooperation of multiple organizations. And that is designed to save the lives of thousands of veterans. So one man decided to solve something that people have been talking about, concerned about, but that was his journey, and we shared it with you. Well, today, our guest has a totally different background. But like anyone I would bring on to you, he saw a problem and decided to engage. And as we get to spend time with him in a few minutes here, he embodies that statement, which was the final title, actually, Simple Truths, Simple Tools, Simple Solutions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and then bring him on. Stephen Ferry was born and raised in Southern England, but he's been here first as a resident and then a citizen since 1978. That was when he first arrived. I affectionately call him the butler's butler, and we'll get into a little bit of what that's about, and he can explain it to you. But very importantly, in terms of his credentials, he has authored 24 books and hundreds of published articles, including an extensive expose of the COVID experience and program in the spring of 2020. Stephen, like I am, is fighting the fascism and tyranny of the globalist agenda. And that's why I wanted him to talk to you today. I wrote in White King and the Table. The entire novel was developed for the purpose of revealing to you that agenda and to attack that agenda and defeat it. Well, this is what he is fighting so effectively. He has successfully urged citizens to mass civil disobedience. And I'm going to ask him a few things about that as we go along. He is the U.S. coordinator for Global Walkout, and he is the founder of Joining Forces, which is designed to focus on bringing together all the non-elites in order to counter the globalist agenda. We're going to be addressing that for sure. You're going to find it fascinating. So let's welcome Stephen Ferry.
Thank you for a lovely introduction, Lee.
Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the Clearview.
Thank you.
And I so appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. I know you and I have had the opportunity to talk on numerous occasions, and we could go on a long time, and I know your wife weighs in as well. But we're going to spend a few minutes together here. I know that my audience is going to get a great deal from this, but before we discuss your projects, would you please tell us a little bit about your upbringing amongst the elites and what the transition was like, if there has been one that kind of moved you away from that or enlightened you about it? I'd love to hear.
Certainly. Well, I went to a British boarding school, one of the top ones, where I was introduced to the whole concept that we are superior. It's actually the boarding school that provided the staff that ran the British Empire. It was Haileybury and Imperial Services College. The idea is that we are superior to everybody else. That's just the mindset. And that was the first problem I had. It didn't add up. And that was one of the things that prompted me to, because I can't just accept something because an authority tells it to me. It has to make sense to me. And that just didn't make sense. It actually got so ridiculous that when I was traveling, I considered the locals to be the foreigners. You know, I'd be in France and I'd think, well, look at all these foreigners here. That's the level of arrogance that was sort of inculcated into us in this school. There were other points too that didn't add up. I didn't really see the point of walking to the chapel through the cloisters and seeing row upon row of students like myself who'd been killed in any of the multiple wars that had been engaged in by the British in order to create what essentially was the largest empire in the world. Anyway, I had questions, they weren't answered at college. And so what I did was I started to research and wrote a book in 1971, actually, where I assessed all that humanity had to offer and concluded that all subjects that mankind had put together were flawed fundamentally because humanity is plagued by something irrational that prevents developing truly workable understandings and technologies. My idea was we should be able to create civilization which lasted. And yet, if you look at it, there's something like over 300 civilizations have come and gone. So obviously there's something funky about the way we do things as a race. I never got that book published because I went into a blue funk at the prospect that humanity was doomed. So, but a couple of years later, what was that?
That's why we're here, right? With this site and this audience. Some people are in a funk, all right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really our job to pull them out of it. That's the way I see it. Anyway, a couple of years later, I read Gary Allen's None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And that basically moved me out of the somewhat innocent view of humankind's failings to the hard to confront adult world of real politics. And specifically the existence of specific evil individuals who actively cause humanity to fail. That was a new concept for me, but it was actually liberating. Because at least it gave me a target, something one could do. You could see that someone was actually sitting there causing these things for the very best of reasons, quote unquote. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, it did in terms of your background. I appreciate that because I think you can probably gather, my audience can, that starting from there to what you discovered and realized could lead you where you are. And I think there are probably other people on this that will be watching this that have had the same journey. Now, I know you have the background as a butler, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, but what led you to engage in that arena at such a high level? And how do you put that together with where you are now and your viewpoints?
That's interesting. You might look at the fact that I'm fighting the globalists, and yet I worked for them as a butler. But it doesn't, the position seems to be conflicting at first blush. But I have been beating the drum incessantly for the last 3 decades to modernize the butler profession and take it out of serving the wealthy and the powerful into representing, as it should, the epitome of service in all walks of life. To me, it was actually inevitable that the deeply entrenched mindset of being of service to British royalty and nobility had to change in the butler profession because of the nature of international employers changing perceptions in society and modern technology. I semi-joke, but I'm actually deadly serious, that the IRS performs a service and should be equally solicitous towards the US taxpayer as the butler is towards the welfare and happiness of his employer. We are all, after all, in service to someone. So I'm happy to say that the butler profession, as a result of my efforts, has finally adopted the modern butler persona. There's still a long way to go, especially in government.
Yeah.
I even had the US military asking recently for training, which is what we provide at the moment. But I didn't really respect their senior officers anymore, and I didn't like all their paperwork, so that didn't go anywhere. But
well, you know, if I may interject there, it's a wonderful point of view that you have because true leaders, I believe, understand that when you lead, you're in a position of service. And what you just described as to what you have contributed to that profession through your writings, through your teachings, through what you're doing, is to, if you switch that viewpoint, and they are there to truly serve the person that's the customer, if you will, or the client, or whatever, And of course, it'd be a long way, I think, before our IRS ever understood that. I appreciate that's a goal, but it's that switch in viewpoint, and that is a leadership viewpoint. And I understand what you would say about the military. I've spent some time with senior leaders in the U.S. military as well, and the best of them are servant leaders, always looking for ways not just to serve their troops, but to serve the public at large that they are there to protect and provide for. And then there are others that are not. So that's a little bit about how we got into it. That's why I affectionately refer to him as the butler's butler, because anyone who wanted a profession of some quality and elegance and so on, but it would have the mindset that would enable them to be the best of the best is what Stephen just described to you. So anyway, listen, Stephen, I want to get into some of the projects here. Now, you know me a bit, but for those of you who are new and joining, I strive in what I write and what I do to empower individuals to know that they can do something, whether they don't have any money to do it with, or they don't have time. Because Stephen, when I interjected a little bit before and I said, well, some people are down in a funk, most people that would be part of this audience are certainly awake and aware, but they're maybe afraid or they're concerned, or they just feel helpless sometimes. They don't know what they can do to help or to fix this. And so I try to empower those always who maybe don't have a lot of money to contribute to an organization, or they don't have the power or the standing that they feel they might need to weigh in with any credibility. They maybe don't have a microphone, maybe don't have a platform, but that there is power that each individual has. So please tell us about your organization joining forces and what it's designed to do. And then I'm going to ask you some questions.
Certainly. Well, first off, as you just sort of touched upon, our power is in our numbers. Individually, we don't have much power. Even if we have the presidential power, that's somewhat limited because of the globalists and the way they've inserted themselves into things and changed laws and so forth. But as a group, especially in large numbers, we have enormous power. And I think you just have to ask, who is it? Louis, whichever Louis parted company with his head in France.
We got it. Yeah.
What happens when the numbers start to rise up? And it's not that I'm encouraging that particular thing, but we do need to reach the point, because it's the only thing that's ever really worked in overcoming an apparently overpowering totalitarian state. The only thing that's ever worked is people rising up peacefully in huge numbers. And so that's where we need to go. But you can't just rise up while there is still a bunch of blue-pilled, brown shirt enforcers to enforce their will. And that's what we've been finding. Australia, for instance, was really overwhelmed by the Australian people, even though they're quite spicy people and not willing to accept someone else's viewpoint. They just laid down pretty well because they were so heavily enforced against. So we need to reach the point where we have enough numbers to totally overpower. There's more and more talk on social media, on the various channels that I belong to in England as well as America and Europe, of the perception changing. There are enough people waking up and seeing how badly they've been served by those people in power, acting on behalf of the globalists. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if it's true or not. I always try and push good news or places where we're winning. I just saw a report that our favorite Herr Schwab has ended up in hospital severely ill.
I hadn't heard that, but I'm certain that a lot of people would say, well, so be it if that's the case for that gentleman. But
exactly,
they're all elderly, so it's more what they've put in place. It's not just them. And it's
exactly. And I don't know whether it's the weight of his years adding up finally to something inevitable, but certainly what is inevitable is all the harmful acts he's caused are bound to have a repercussions on him. And so
Yeah,
Sorry?
I'm going to just kind of guide us a little bit there because I don't want to go down that path on him too far. So with joiningforces.world, and by the way, we will post this website. It's right there when people log in to watch this. They can go to your website. But is that a place where you bring people together? Is it full of ideas? What is it that you've done with that?
Basically, I have to go back a bit.
Okay.
We started off with Defending Humanity, which was designed to act as a cover under which all freedom fighters could coalesce to counteract the continuous effort to divide and conquer us by the globalists. And it was basically giving a common platform under which people could fight back. But I dropped that pretty quickly because human rights, which was the purpose of defending humanity, human rights have been squirreled by the globalists
Mhm.
and do not have much support, do not have, as stated, do not have much support in the freedom fighter community. In other words, it didn't bring people together. People rejected that notion, even though every single human right as delineated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights had been violated by the COVID scam.
Right.
And so as a result of that, we switched to a very simple statement, joiningforces.world, because that name totally says what we are trying to do. We're not even trying to support our own or promote our own um, brand. That's not what it's about. It's simply to bring people together and to continually advise people in ways that will bring them together rather than allow them to be divided. The globalists, of course, have done a brilliant job of dividing people over Ukraine and Russia. They've done a brilliant job of dividing people more recently in Palestine versus Israel. And you find people very strongly taking sides. And our message is, look, don't take sides. Keep your eye on the mountain. The mountain is the globalists who are fomenting all this discord and disruption. And that's the basic message that we have. But what we actually do is we don't really have lines of influence into people who are celebrities or people who are power movers. We're totally at the grassroots level. And because as you're saying, it really does depend on the people themselves, and particularly in America, for the reasons that your group, I'm sure, knows, we are really the hope for humanity. And if we do stand up effectively and don't fall for the constant bull bait from the globalists, then that will succeed. But in order for that to work, we have to keep people's spirits up. We can't have them going into a blue funk, as we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
Because that'll just bring on exactly what we all don't want to have happen.
Well,
People have to, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Finish your sentence there, and then I want to add something.
Sure. In order for people not to go into a blue funk, we have to keeping their spirits up, giving them little bits of wins here and there. Like I saw also that in Switzerland there's a new central party that is the majority, which is basically saying we are not going to follow anything from any exterior sources except the UN Security Council. In other words, the European Union isn't going to dictate its insanities to us in Switzerland. So I thought that's the kind of good news we like to spread, where we're starting to win against this global behemoth. And so
Well,
we give, that's a long sentence. I'll let you ask your
yeah, well,
question and then I'll continue.
and that's fine, but it's the sharing of information because the hope comes from people having little wins and knowing about successful actions that they can copy. But I've discovered, and I assume joining forces, because I have looked at your site, also helps people understand don't get yourself overwhelmed by trying to solve the entire problem all at once. It's one success here on a gradient, then building on a success, finding about another group that inspires, because we don't all have to be doing the same projects. In fact, we won't be. But if somebody's breaking through in any area, I think what Stephen, because I'm talking to my folks now, I think what Stephen is sharing is that any breakthrough or success, when known, empowers and inspires. And then the creativity and the imagination and the courage of the individual comes up. But it's what I found that I works, and you're probably working with the same thing, and you can tell me if you are, is that we've been so inundated and so bombarded around the world, but we're talking mostly in the United States here, that we're at effect of this news. And even as we're trying to study to learn, it's all about what's inbound. It's overwhelming people, and we're sitting at effect, and people know they need to do something, is cause something. But little steps just move someone from being stuck at effect to being a gentle cause in any area. Agreed?
You actually took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly where we're going and what we're doing.
Okay.
No, I love it. And it shows we're on the same page, basically, and on the same side. We realized very early on that you can't give people too much. Even giving them a series of steps to take to address something is too much, because they look at it and think, oh yeah, that's nice, or I'm glad someone's going to do something about it, and they sit back and don't do anything about it themselves. You really have to spoon feed a simple step at a time. And that's what we found works, because we are trying to put them, as you say, at slight gentle cause instead of being at effect. Being at effect means they just sit around not doing anything,
Exactly.
except complaining, perhaps.
Yeah.
But what we want them to do is actually do something. And what we've done is we've isolated about 36 globalist agenda that are very destructive and harmful. For instance, the climate hoax, that's just one of them. The CBDC, the central bank digital currency, that's another, etc. And what we do is we look for what are the 10 steps that people can take, simple steps, which have the most promise of success in having some effect at undermining or cutting the legs out from underneath the globalist agenda. And then we feed it to them one at a time. So in effect, I wouldn't say guaranteeing it, because there's still going to be some people who really are just keyboard warriors, or people who are armchair critics. But where someone does have any spark of action within them, they then can take that action, and when taken in large enough numbers, will have some effect at undercutting the globalist agenda. But more importantly, it will keep them in the driver's seat. They're no longer sitting around at effect of the globalist agenda.
I want to underscore that point, because he just said it puts you in the driver's seat. And also, I have looked at his site, and when you go to joiningforces.world, you'll see that the subjects are laid out there, but the steps do come one at a time, so that you get one and you can accomplish that. Then you get into the second one, so you don't accidentally overwhelm yourself with looking at too much of what the future steps are going to be. And it is a very appropriate way to bring about a gradual empowerment. That is, by the way, why, Stephen, my series is in 4 novels. It had to be, because every novel reveals and takes the reader to a different level of understanding and willingness to engage. But for those of you who are listening, don't underestimate what he said there. To move from being at effect to the gentle cause and staying in the driver's seat, that is a great analogy. You're in the driver's seat, and you don't have to spend hours and hours or be a keyboard warrior, as he put it. You don't have to put a lot of money in. You simply decide to take one action. And like muscles that atrophy, now we're going in the opposite direction, because once you start to engage in action and you start to learn about other people and what they're doing, we pick up ideas from other people. And so it's kind of like a place where people can come together, much like we're doing here. Now, I wanted to ask you something, because on the civil disobedience, definition of terms is a huge thing. And the PSYOPs people and the propaganda people, which I'm quite expert with, they are constantly redefining terms and making things seem what they're not. And civil disobedience after January 6th has a whole other meaning. But when you speak of civil disobedience or have helped people with that, can you define what you mean by civil disobedience?
Yes, it's basically withdrawing any support whatsoever from the globalist agendas. So if you're being asked to do X, Y, Z, you simply don't do it, or you talk to other people about not doing it. And when that happens in numbers, obviously they can't do anything about it. They can try and arrest, confiscate the bodies of people who are more vocal. But if other people continue to stand up, like we were almost there with the Canadians,
Uh-huh.
with their pushback, they were so brave and so brilliant, but they just didn't continue it, and they and there weren't enough people who were realizing that the what was being done was completely illegal or against their constitution, etc., etc.
Are you speaking of the
But
truckers?
the truckers,
Yes,
yes, quite right.
the trucking caravan. Yes,
And it really does, which is why global walkout is what we're supporting, which is basically the moment where we get into civil disobedience, and we haven't pressed the button yet because we don't have enough numbers. And all that'll happen to any group that goes out and starts protesting at the moment is what happened to the Canadian truckers. Of course, there are some times when it is effective, but at the moment, if you don't have sufficient numbers, and that has to be literally in the millions, because we've had hundreds of
right,
thousands protesting, like in Japan right now, they're protesting about that number, I don't know how many, protesting against the WHO mandates, etc.
right.
It's not enough numbers while you've still got the globalists in power and supported by the military and police. So we
Exactly.
really have to keep pushing and building the numbers before we can all step out and say, sorry, you don't have our support anymore. I don't mean we have to arrive with pitchforks. We
No,
simply
exactly.
arrive with our voices.
And he's speaking about peaceful demonstrations, but it doesn't mean you have to be in some huge demonstration and travel cross country to go into a protest march. That the disobedience is just refusing to do something you know that you shouldn't do and is not proper to do. But it's interesting, Stephen, because after the launch of my fourth book, I then started what was called Operation Stone Age Viral. And you're talking about it does take the numbers because the solution in the novel is Operation Stone Age Viral. So I brought it into the real world, and actually, this is an extension of that. And I don't want to spoil the people's mystery on what Operation Stone Age Viral is, but I laid out I would have meetings monthly to try to bring people together so they would understand how, in numbers, we could duplicate and compound the effect, if you will, almost like a network marketing operation, just duplication by duplication by duplication. And I laid out for them how to get into 4 million plus in a matter of simply a few months, a handful of months, laid it all out on paper, showed it to them, diagrammed it to them, and it involved just a simple step that they had to involve 10 people with. And it was very hard to get them to comprehend it and do it. They didn't seem to understand that one person starts, and then if they bring, let's say, 10 more along, and then each of those brings 10 more along, the numbers do become very, very large, very fast. So that's what you're up against as well. And he's exactly correct. There are many, many things that will be very effective and stop a lot of these agendas cold, just stop them in their tracks. But it can't be done by a handful of people, and it can't be done with even larger numbers, but only in one area. Let's say it's got to be a coordinated understanding and implementation. Didn't you tell me about a success relevant to the digital currency in France that occurred? Was it?
Um,
Was it you? Were they in the grocery stores? They all went with cash.
Oh yes, that's it was not just France, it's several countries, but yes, if one person goes up to, because we're keeping cash alive, so you go and try and pay in cash at a store where they say no cash, and it's just one of you, it's not so effective. But if you have literally 50 shoppers, they fill their baskets, and this is actually what happened several places. They fill their baskets, and then they all go to stand in line, and they're told, no, sorry, we don't take cash. So you don't get rude or anything like that. You simply say, well, look, we'll come back when you do pay cash, when you do accept cash. And they walk off, leaving 50 baskets full of stuff. And then the manager gets drawn in. He says, this is rubbish. Come on, pay in cash, you know.
Exactly. He knows who he's trying to serve there, and
Yeah,
that he does want the sales and he does want the money. And that worked, if I remember right. They just took the cash.
yeah, in several places.
Yeah.
Or they had to leave, and then when they went back the next time, cash was being accepted. And I see that, you know, I read recently that Whole Foods, you know, they have their palm prints and you just walk out, or I don't know, they have some bio indicator that is accepted as payment connected to the credit card. They've actually scrubbed that now.
Good.
And what was actually happening was the biometrics weren't actually being observed. Um, they actually had a bunch of people in India using videos to see whether people were being honest about it. I don't know if that makes
Right.
sense.
Well, yeah, no, I do, and I think that hit the news not too long ago there.
Yeah,
So they've stopped it because one, that revealed a betrayal with people who thought, oh, this is a nice, cool technology, which by the way, I would never support, but this is a nice, cool technology. I want to put my palm prints there. And they thought they were engaged in all this cool technology to only realize it was 1,000 people spying on them and looking
yeah,
at really revealed the spying technology in a very low tech version, which is even crazier. I mean, I couldn't even dream that up in a novel, actually, what that was about. But it was real, folks. So if this is kind of new to you and you missed it, what he's describing there was real. And it's, but it's one person, as he said, in the grocery store insisting on cash is just one annoying customer. A whole body of people in a grocery store insisting on cash is a protest. It falls under civil disobedience, but it's done in a polite way, the way he described that they did it, because one does not have to be ill mannered and upset everyone around one to just stand one's ground. And it pointed out the issue where then the business owner himself could make a decision that was better suited to his customers. And that's going to happen. We're going to have to deal with that with the banks here. And in banks in this country, we're going to have to deal with it a lot because that push is there. But if you're understanding with these stories, gentle cause, things that we can do, but they have to be done, whatever it is, in sufficient quantity to make an impact. Now, Stephen, before we wrap up with your part, I noticed on your site you were talking about, you had quite a list of reasons that you are quite certain that these elitists, these power elitists, are guaranteed to fail. Can you share one or two of the reasons why you're certain that they're going to fail? Speaking
I'd
of
be
hope.
happy to. Actually, there are 28 reasons, and I'm sure once I've got to the end, I put out one every week. By the time I've got to the 28th, I'll probably come up with some more, or someone else will. But the basic reason is they violate the laws of life. You can't, for instance, create a team when you regard others as being riffraff or you know, Untermensch, as the Nazis were fond of saying. I mean, that's one. And it's sort of the central theme, actually, because if your attitude, like going back to what I said initially, the attitude of elitists, and for me, elite people do exist. People such as yourself who are very good at things and earn their way up to the top in the respect of people. And then you've got the people such as many at my school who consider themselves elite just because they were considering themselves elite. But didn't actually have anything positive they were giving to society. And it's that basic attitude, which if you add to it the notion that there are evil people, elitists a lot of them are just stupid because they violate the laws of life, but there are evil people in the world, a very small minority actually, but their whole game is to push people down because they feel threatened by people for no reason whatsoever. And it's that attitude ends up in all sorts of behaviors which guarantee that they will fail because other people will not support them. And
Exactly.
you're finding that now all these bad programs that they've got, like 30 plus, are so stupid. I mean, this whole you have to be stupid to believe what they're saying.
Yes.
And you have to be stupid to believe to actually say it. And that's what they are. They're stupid, so they're bound to fail. Those are
Well,
the overviews.
well, I can see it's very interesting when you said that, because I think I can see, and I'm sure the viewers here can see as well, that starting from where you started, where you got a clear view of, as a young man and a boy, the people who view themselves as superior. And then you realize, but that didn't necessarily make sense. The transition you made, that ties so much in with, they violate the laws of life, that we are not superior by a birthright or by a race or a color or anything. It's not about that. It's who we are, how we serve our fellow man, what we contribute to the society, and so on. And that anyone can participate in anywhere in the world. That's that common sense factor, people. I write about psyops and brainwashing and perception management to help you clear away the fog of that, get rid of the lies that you may have embraced. And then someone like Stephen comes on and says the obvious, because once the clouds are gone and you can see clearly, you go, yeah, that does violate the laws of life. I'm not necessarily inferior just because I am, especially not the people who are awake and aware now and want to solve the problem. So on his site, you can go in there, and he's adding content as well. But it's a wonderful site to go to find out the radiant, simple step that's available to do right then, that will put you more at cause, and which will reinforce some of the other projects that you may already be involved in. And I'm going to be wrapping up a bit with that as we wrap up here. But when you go to that site, this is not like, his site is not like other sites either. His site is one where you will feel safe and comfortable and know that there are like-minded people out there everywhere who have ideas, and you have your own. And so you will look for formats and ways to put that together as well. So before we leave, Stephen, I'm going to, and then I'm going to lead into my final thing with my folks. But given what you've talked about, and I appreciate so much what you shared, as you can tell, he's got a great sense of humor. Those of you who've read my novels and have been part of this and watched the 4-part series know that this is an exact next step out of the final hour there on simple truths, simple tools, and simple solutions. And so you go to his website because they're in there as well. But what we've really been talking about, speaking of words, comes down to synergy. And I want everyone to listen very closely now, because I know there are people here who are opinion leaders in your own arenas. You are powerful in your own arenas with your own organizations. And then there are some who just have a willing heart, a willing spirit. But here's the definition from Oxford on synergy: the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. Now, I want to pause for just a minute there and have you think about that. Everything that Stephen has been talking about falls under the intention of creating synergy. Everything that I do falls under the synergy. But here's my message. You might need to put a seatbelt on for this as I kind of tie this together for you here, because I speak all the time and started talking about it at the launch of White King and the Seat at the Table. We're playing a game of whack-a-mole, a game set up by an enemy, and that's what he is talking about and countering, and it's being run by that enemy. And it's very hard to win a game set up and run by the enemy in there, because each of us is fighting in different arenas or engaged in different arenas. Some very effectively, we are having breakthroughs. There are victories occurring. The problem is that the game goes on and it's draining time and money and energy. But even when you have your effects, I want you to review that definition, just the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. And that was what Stephen was driving at as well. We have our individual effects, and our organizations may be powerful and have effects. But even if we added up all of those effects together, synergy can create an effect greater than the sum total of all of them. And synergy does not require coordination. We don't have to have an organization chart here. We don't have to have a command sheet. We don't have to have meetings and bureaucracy and structure like that. It is interaction and the cooperation of one group to another, one individual, but let's say groups, such as joining forces.world, what we did with John Spagnola, what I'm doing here. This is the purpose of the Clearview. Yes, I give you content. Yes, I do what I do and try to keep a different perspective and enlighten. But what I really love and want, and I believe we have to have, is synergy. And that is us knowing about each other and what groups are working on what, and knowing that if everybody who's got successful actions and is producing effects is cooperating with one another, synergy automatically happens and it busts through exponentially and victory can be achieved. It isn't going to necessarily, in my opinion, be achieved one organization at a time, because the enemy is attacking in all directions in multiples of attack lines, any one of which could defeat us. And so the word for this session today is synergy. And I would like you to take that away, maybe look, when you get into his site, look at it through the filter of, oh, how can this bring about synergy? Because we got to move faster now. Time is very, very short. And because some of these guys are elderly, like George Soros and Klaus Schwab and so on, yes. But what they have created and the team they have trained has its own synergy, because they too may not have a command structure like I revealed to you in the novel, but they do cooperate with one another. So anyway, Stephen, I appreciate so much the humor with which you shared what you shared, but the insights. Now, they're gentle, but they're very profound. And they coordinate perfectly with what we're doing here. So I'm going to let you go. And I'm just going to wrap up with a message that I have for my audience, something that I need to appeal to them for. So once again, thank you so much. We will have this up May 1st. So, and with your website there, so everyone, but once again, it's joiningforces.world. And
thanks very much, Lee. I appreciate the opportunity. I might add, if you don't mind, if you
Please.
Excuse the impertinence, symbiosis might be a word that goes along with synergy.
Exactly.
The recognition of our symbiosis as live groups, which then leads to synergy.
Yeah, it's a great word. And get into that one. Look up that definition. Don't take other people's definitions for it, especially not the media or the press or the propagandists. Look that word up, because when Stephen was talking earlier about how life works, we do work symbiotically. And life works symbiotically. And yes, that is one of the ways for the interaction to occur without it even having to be deliberate, if one understands, and it will create synergy. Thank you for adding into that. That's awesome.
Thank you, Lee, and to your wonderful audience. Bye-bye.
Okay, good. We'll just let him depart there. And I just want to finish. And I hope you got a lot out of that. And I know you will dig into that website. And I hope it empowered you. And you got 2 words to look up, really. Even if you thought you know before, even when I think I know a word, I always like to look it up. Because as I then look at it in the present time moment with the situations that are in front of me or some area that I'm working in, it may take on new meaning. So I'm glad Stephen added in at the end there, symbiotic as well. Now, the appeal that I want to make is to you, my subscribers, because he laid out very clearly that to make the impact, we join forces. We work on a gradient, but to make the impact necessary to stop a lot of this agenda and what is planned for us by these bad guys, I call them, is going to take a lot of people. And it can grow exponentially, but we all need to work together on that. So my appeal to you is that you really encourage family, friends, work colleagues to subscribe to this website. Now, it is a paid subscription site, admittedly, but the work we're doing here does need to be behind a protected wall. But it's not a lot of money. It's like less than $5 a week. It's 1 cup of coffee per week to have the insight and the guests and the content that's presented, which I know will empower you and which allows us to create the synergy that we want, particularly if you engage in reading the entire White King series and you understand Operation Stone Age Viral. We could literally solve this in a matter of months if that is followed through. And I'm not going to take the time to describe that because you can get into that. But I need your help with that because this is a safe site. This is a site that's not into the usual ordinary news or ordinary commentary. You got plenty of that out there. This is the spot where we take a different angle of view on the same circumstances or a different elevation of view on the same circumstances that everybody's trying to weigh through and figure out. But from a different angle and a different elevation, the clear view, a different view emerges. And once you have that different picture, it almost resolves itself. I know we're doing that here. I've had 20 years of success of that with the novels, and now it is happening with this. But if people aren't here to get that unique content, they aren't, in my opinion, going to be as effective in fighting the whack-a-mole game as they could be if they have insights from people like Stephen and from the rest of the content on this site. Now, the good news is that we are making available free content now. So on the commentary section, which is weekly, as you know, you can, there's some that's posted right on the homepage, which has video that can be watched for free, has commentary and so on. But you as subscribers, when you go into the commentary section now, you will see that there's quite a bit of commentary in there that says free. What that means is you can copy that and paste that and get it out to your list. You can get it out into your organizations. There's no charge for that. So you can reach into your sphere of influence with content from this site. And also let me hear from you. If you're reading content or listening to a podcast, but especially let's say the commentary, and it's your favorite, tell me, I love that commentary, or I love this or that, or if this is one that you really would like to have come out from behind the protected wall and be made available to everybody, just go in and, reach Lee. There's a section that has a tab that's, comments or connect with Lee. And get that over to us, and I will look at that because it's your feedback that will enable me to know what impacted you and you feel would impact the groups that you are part of or you are leading. And I will get that out and I'll instruct my people to get that out into the environment so that you can have it. We will be bringing this up, if Stephen agrees to that, we will be bringing this up on YouTube as well, and not just on this site so that this content will be out there. But I can't do that with all of it because of some of the things that we do get to discussing. And I do have to protect, my guests, but also myself. But in any case, you got that? Please give me your feedback on what you want to see made available, but understand that it will be that duplication process, because if each of you brings 2 or 3 new subscribers, one, the reach of this organization and the impact of the Clearview will be widening. The credibility of the Clearview will be widening. And people who want to get into it and have access to it will be widening. But very importantly, with the free content, then your organization might have 100 people in it. They can now all have whatever it is that I've made free and available. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is her team very often contacts me wanting to know if an article that I have written can be made available for her to post on her website. And that's an example of someone who is duplicating. So each of you fighting in your various game, the mole that you're fighting, whether it's election integrity, the pandemic, whether it's human rights, whether it's education, parents' rights, the attack lines are numerous. Wherever you're fighting, imagine if this content was spreading into your organizations, and then those people had access without committing any time or any money to be able to spread it as well. That is what reinforces the symbiotic relationship of the like-mindedness and the common goals and purposes that we have, but also the synergy where our combined effects, the sum total of our combined effect, will be superseded by the effect, the synergistic effect of this cooperation and awareness. So please do that. It's ever expanding agreement. We're communicating. Lord knows I'm communicating. Stephen is communicating. John Spagnola is communicating. Most of you are communicating. When we continue to communicate And we continue to get ever expanding agreement on the underlying truths. I drive for the underlying truths. I could see that Stephen did as well. So that we don't get hung up in topical issues that are political so much that other people are handling or you already have a solution on, or where it'll be over and done with and nobody's going to remember it a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. These are underlying truths and principles when we get this right, because as Stephen said, it's about life. It's about how life works. When we get this right, we can not only fix this now, but our children and our grandchildren will be safe. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed all of April's content. I certainly hope you have enjoyed the beginning of May. And you'll see me next month, and you'll hear from me through each week in the month of May. Can't wait. And I can't wait to hear from you. And at the same time, get everybody you know into the White King series. I wish that none of that had ever proven true, but since it all did, it's probably time for every citizen in America to read those novels, because the underlying truths are in there. Anyway, I love you all. Thank you so much for your time.